Hey there, Alex Kidman here, and today I'm looking at the Lenovo IdeaPad 1 Gen 7 running on an AMD Ryzen 3 7320 processor. Now that's a heck of a name for a laptop, but the reason that I go through all that detail is because Lenovo makes a lot of IdeaPads. They make a lot of different variants, a lot of different internals. This particular model has been pitched to me as a student laptop, reasonably priced for most parents to buy for their kids. And look, while I'm a tech journalist, I'm also a parent of high school kids, so I recognize that in this day and age, pretty much every student needs a laptop. And Lenovo thinks, well, this is the one you should buy. But should you? Well, the pitch here really does rest on that AMD Ryzen 3 7320 processor, because the idea here is that it's meant to deliver superior processing performance and battery endurance while not being too expensive. And look, that's a pretty bold claim, but it's one that the IdeaPad 1 Gen 7 mostly lives up to. Now, it is still a basic student laptop, of course, so your teenager is probably not going to get too excited by it if they, for example, wanted a gaming laptop. But you are getting what you pay for, and maybe a little bit more besides. Let's talk about the design. The IdeaPad 1 Gen 7's design practically screams student to me because so many of these devices are built in basically the same way with the same considerations in mind around cost, build quality, and what they're going to be used for. It only comes in a single colour, cloud grey if you will, with a plastic frame that does keep the weight down, but at the cost of some rigidity. So, within that education space, for example, it means it's probably not going to warp your kid's spine when it's in their backpack all day, but its plasticky build means that if it gets too many knocks and bumps, it's probably going to break. If we open it up, you get a fairly nice keyboard and trackpad, fairly good response. It's a minor complaint, but I will say I don't particularly love this little curved bottom to each of the keys, just aesthetically. It doesn't really affect how the keyboard works when I touch type anyway, so wouldn't hit me so bad, but it's there. I don't love it, but I can deal with it. You probably won't notice it after a while. What you will notice, though, is the screen. So you get a 14-inch 1366 by 768 Twisted-O-Matic screen, and like most screens of that type, when you move away from being directly in front of it, it washes out fairly quickly. Now, this is totally par for the course for this price bracket. But the consideration there is really, if you're going to be working on this by yourself or your kid's going to be working on it by themselves, not really a big issue. But if they need to display their work to a teacher or to their classmates or whatever, then everyone's going to have to kind of huddle around to see it clearly. One thing I do like that the IdeaPad 1 Gen 7 has is a decent little array of ports. Many cheap laptops really do leave you wanting with just one or two, but the IdeaPad goes a bit further. On the left-hand side, you get USB-A, a full HDMI port, USB-C 3.2 Gen 1, and a combo headphone mic socket, while on the right, you get another USB-A and a card reader. One thing I would have really liked to see here is for that USB-C port to also be a power port so that you could use other USB-C chargers. It doesn't do that. Again, I'm sure that's a price point consideration. Instead, you've got one of those standard pin type chargers. Got to be a bit careful there because they're a little bit easier to drag off a desk, but also a little bit easier to bend. Generally, though, they're pretty easy to replace, which is a plus. So what about performance? Well, here in Australia, the IdeaPad 1 Gen 7 sells in a single configuration with an AMD Ryzen 3 7320U CPU, 8GB of RAM, and a 128GB SSD. Again, within this price bracket, somewhat par for the course. It's nice to see 8GB of RAM there, though. There's still quite a few student laptops out there that only do 4GB, and I would advise most people against 4GB. Those machines are really going to chug. Now, do bear in mind with that 128GB of storage, though, of course, you won't see a full 128GB because Windows 11 Home 64, which is pre-installed, will take its chunk out of it as well. One pleasing factor here is that Lenovo hasn't absolutely stuffed it with pre-installed trial apps. There is a version of McAfee, if you care, taking up other space. I do prefer that kind of approach. I'd rather configure a Windows machine myself than have lots of bloatware taking up my space that I have to manually ferret out. So how does that AMD Ryzen 3 7320U perform? The answer is quite well for most everyday student tasks. I'll throw up on screen the benchmark results that I've got from it, all of which are at or slightly above what I'd expect to see in this price bracket. Nothing absolutely exceptional here, to be clear, but pleasingly decent for everyday student work. Now, that's a really important consideration, though, because if you're talking about a student, for example, who's doing multimedia or programming or something that's doing lots of number crunching, then this might not be the machine for them. You may have to budget a bit more for something with a bit meatier performance. But for those everyday kind of student things, for all the Google Classroom stuff and basic Microsoft Word and all those kind of everyday tasks, yeah, this is perfectly fine. It'll run pretty well. If you do want to push it with video editing or multimedia work, look, those applications will still run, but run might not be the right word there. Crawl might be the better word depending on how heavily you push it. So what about battery life? Well, as I've already mentioned, you get a standard pin style charger with a 65 watt brick, or at least the model I had a 65 watt brick. It'd be nice to see USB-C charging, but I suppose at this price point it was probably a bit much to ask for. Lenovo's claim for the battery in this beast is that it can last for up to 14 hours. Now, that's 14 hours of video streaming, and you're probably not just going to use it as a Netflix machine, let's face it. But 14 hours should, in theory, be enough for most people in a given day. The issue here is that's an up to figure, and up to figures are notoriously rubbery. So I've tested it myself, both with video streaming and more intensive application testing. And look, I didn't hit 14 hours, but I very, very rarely do. About 9.5 hours is more typical for video, quite a bit less if you push it hard. Now, here's the thing. You've got to take that number in context. And the context here is, look, 9.5 hours, more than enough, and that's continuous usage, of course. Talking in an education context, it'll be on, it'll be off, and you may be able to charge it during the day. A day's battery life, yeah, it's feasible, and this is actually, again, within that price bracket, within that price concern, this is decent, if not bordering on good performance as it happens. It's just that it doesn't live up to the manufacturer claims, but then so few laptops do. So should you buy one? Well, look, typically I get most excited about, exciting machines, new designs, thin and lights, gaming laptops, powerful stuff, because they're exciting. This isn't that kind of exciting machine. But that's fine, because what it is a workhorse machine. It's an everyday machine. It's reasonably priced. It's reasonably powerful. The battery life is fairly pleasing for the money. Not exceptional, but pleasing for the money, and that's an important qualification. What I'd suggest you do, though, is look around at what you can get for this kind of money. So here in Australia, the IdeaPad 1 Gen 7 retails, officially at the time I'm recording this, for around $629 Australian. You may be able to get one a little bit cheaper on sale. One critical detail to remember there, though, is that the IdeaPad line encompasses a lot of machines, a lot of processors, a lot of devices, and you do need to check that you're getting the device that you think you're getting. There may be older stock in the channel, which some places are selling off a lot cheaper, but that would obviously give you slower performance. Still, for the money, this is a decent and pleasing laptop. Anyway, that's my take on the Lenovo IdeaPad 1 Gen 7. Got any questions? Throw them into the comment field below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And as a special bonus for lasting all the way through to the end of the episode, you can have that one thing that the internet truly loves, a cat picture.